Welcome to the Mystic Detectives podcast, where we seek to unlock the wonders of the unknown. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano.
Welcome to the show today. Hey, Crystal, have you seen any shows you've enjoyed recently?
Oh my gosh, yes.
What have you seen?
Okay, it's on Amazon, and it's called Good Omens, and it is so good. It's got David Tennant and Michael Sheen, and Michael Sheen is an angel, and David Tennant is a demon, and it's amazing.
Is it? That's awesome. I saw it on the list, but I haven't looked at it yet. What's amazing about it?
Oh, just their chemistry, the storyline's great. It's so good.
Fun. Hey, I've been listening to a new podcast recently. It's called Mystic Detectives.
Going for you.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. The podcast presenters are pretty awesome. So I'd like you to check it out someday and see if you like it. Another podcast I really enjoy is something you might enjoy with our nursing background is This Podcast Will Kill You. And I've really enjoyed that. I've listened recently to one about color. It's been traditionally called color blindness, but now they call it color. Oh, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a different sort of phrase. And it wasn't just a politically correct sort of phrase, but it was something that was more descriptive, because people who are colorblind aren't actually blind to see color.
Color selectivity or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And it's because their rods and cones basically don't communicate properly to the brain. And so our brain apparently identifies color by comparing a bunch of colored rods, and the brain goes, nope, not that color. Nope, not that color. And it narrows it down, obviously in a very microsecond sort of way. And the people who cannot see ranges of colors, their rods can't compare. So they don't have enough information in their own eye rods. And I thought that was interesting because I didn't really understand. And I feel like it's almost less of a brain function than a physical eye function. I always thought it was more of a brain function, and it works together, but it sounds like it's, from what I've heard and understood, it's more of a physical eye function. So that one's been really cool for me. And I've listened to all kinds of crazy stuff. And when I do, my family said, why are you listening to something about Legionnaire's disease? I'm like, well, it's interesting. And could be because I'm a nurse, but anyway, so that's been great for me.
I started watching a show just recently. I'm only on episode 2 or 3, called This Was In Me, I think. This Came Out of Me. And it's emergency room doctors.
I gotta see that. Which is the agency? Who carries that? I don't know.
It's Amazon.
Okay, I've got that.
But oh my goodness, the picture for the overall show, I don't know what you call that, is a person pulling a cockroach out of a woman's nose.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen one that's called Monsters Inside Me. One of the ones I saw, this lady came into the ER multiple times, and actually, she had come in and she kept saying, my head is itching. It's itching. It's itching. And they couldn't see why. And one day she was in there and a worm literally burrowed out of her skin. I know. And they're saying that might be the problem. I know. I can't even. Oh my gosh. Well, that's pretty cool. So now that we've totally grossed each other out and potentially our audience, let me introduce our guest today. She's got some really interesting perspectives about experiences she's had.
Here is our special guest, who happens to be my daughter, Julianna. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Julianna Peterson, and I am super excited to share my experiences.
Would you like to explain one that comes to mind?
Well, when your brother Art passed away, I saw a little girl just staring right at me. She had big, beautiful blue eyes, and I was alone in this house, and so I knew that she must have been a spiritual being, and so I thought that was really cool. And it's always been right after somebody has passed away, or in my daughter's experience, instance, I should say, she was close to passing. So the whole month before her passing, angels would come to me, and like the first thing they said is there isn't much time with her on this earth. And so they just comforted me for that whole month, and every time I would nurse her. And so it was just like a really neat experience. And so I would take tons of pictures of her and our family. And we spent one last time as a family, and she passed away. And then right after she passed away, she came to me and told me that she loved me, and I could hear it. And I asked if anybody else could hear it, but they couldn't hear that. So I knew that she was just specifically talking to me. Yeah.
So when you think of these experiences, have you ever kind of thought of what it could be called? I mean, some of these experiences are just called mystic or supernatural or a phenomenon. Have you ever thought of what this could mean to you? What kind of a experience this is?
Probably supernatural, like we were talking earlier.
Yeah, it feels like it might be supernatural to me too. Do you have any idea on that, Crystal?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a lot of terms you could kind of interchange, I think. Paranormal, supernatural, mystic, spiritual. But they all mean something different to different people, right? There are people that are religious, and spiritual means specifically something from their God, right? I feel like in my case, I tend to typically call it, what do I call it? I don't think I've ever put a name to it, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
When I do Reiki, and often I'll have some sort of a message or a visit, and I usually call it a visitation from source or angels or guides, depending on who the person is, but more often than not, I'll call it a message from source. And I always know that when the message is for me versus when it's for someone else. And more often than it's not, the ones I know that are for someone else come to me, I say them, and I forget them altogether. And so to me, that tells me that I'm just a conduit for that. And so some of the things that you're describing were absolutely messages for you specifically.
Yeah.
Now, has there been an experience? Well, first, let me say this. We have some guests on the show that are considered experts in their field. I think many of us are more just people who experience things. Do you feel like you would be an expert or someone who is experiencing these things differently, or what do you say?
I just experience. I enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and that can be a really good thing. And in fact, enjoying the ride is an important part of it. Last night, we had some feelings that we were getting a message for one of Julianna's neighbors. And Eliza, her daughter, our granddaughter, was feeling uncomfortable, saying that she felt like it was scary. So we talked a little bit about that, how she has the opportunity of inviting light and not dark. Now, do you feel like you've ever actually invited one or the other, or do you just feel like light comes to you?
Light comes to me. And actually, speaking of like me just riding the waves of this, right after I had the experience with my daughter Zendaya, like it stopped for up until like last year, because I think I just like kind of
Said no, thank you.
Yeah, it just was overwhelming for me, and I had to find myself again. And so I think I found myself, and like I know how to find that peace again and to allow those experiences. And I know I went off topic, but
no, that's perfect.
no,
And in fact, it segues into a question I ask people a lot of times. Was there a specific moment that you felt you needed to block this ability, gift, whatever a person wants to call it?
Yeah.
If some people will have an actual moment in time where they're like, oh no, it's more than I can take right now. Did you feel like there was a specific moment, or you just needed to process what you'd had?
Well, I think because it was my daughter that I needed that time to recover and just heal from her passing and the whole experience. So yeah, that was
Sure.
That was big.
That makes sense. And we were talking about an experience you had at the Lagoon Amusement Park. Do you remember that? Would you like to share that one?
Yeah, my mom had just recently gone through chemo that
It was a Hatfield
day or
event.
something.
We had gone on
Yeah.
a Hatfield summer event. And go
Yeah.
ahead.
And then this little girl walked up to her. My mom was just laying there with her eyes closed, just resting a little bit. And this girl blew a kiss to her and just gave her that love and walked away. And it was just the sweetest and most peaceful thing I've ever like witnessed.
And from my perspective, Juliana came off this ride. You know, she was 17, so certainly old enough to be on a ride herself, but I was walking around with her. And she came off this ride crying. And I thought, I don't know if you remember that part of it, but she came off crying. And I'm like, what happened? What did you do? I mean, did you stick your finger somehow? I don't know. And she said, no, Mom, did you see that little girl? And I said, what little girl? And she said, the little girl that was blowing you kisses. And she had come off the ride as quickly as she could, she said, because she wanted to see who she was. But when she came down from the ride, there was no one to be seen. And plus, she was something like 3, way too young to be there by herself. And
Right.
Juliana had maintained sight of me until just for a few moments while she was turning a corner or something. And the girl was nowhere. And so what's interesting to me is, I don't know, do you remember what she looked like?
Yeah, a little girl with blue eyes.
Yeah. So again, another little blonde girl with blue eyes. And so
Right.
anyway, just think that's really interesting. And so what do you make of these experiences?
Really neat because I get to experience them. And like my husband, he wants to have these experiences, and I've kind of shown him pointers and how to bring them into his realm. But I've had these since I was 5, and so it's been what I know. So he needs to bring it forth. So
Mhm.
I don't know. And then I just think it's really neat that I get to experience them.
Yeah. And what did you tell Eliza about how she could bring these to herself a little bit more last night?
Oh, through meditation to start with, to bring those peaceful energies into her into her surroundings.
Mhm.
And I actually have a thought about meditation. I think that a lot of people think that meditation is sitting, cross-legged with your hands up like this. I don't know if I
Oh,
can-
yeah.
Oming, right? Yeah, that's meditation. But the reality is there's so many ways to meditate.
Absolutely.
The way is like cards, right? You
Mhm.
could, honestly, I'm talking about tarot cards, but it just occurred to me, playing solitaire with a deck of playing cards can be a way to meditate. Going through Minecraft and mining and just letting your mind, not think about what you're doing on the video game and just meditating, frankly.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to meditate that don't involve a yogi stance and all of that.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah,
I agree.
I just learned that like a few years back because I was getting super anxious and everything.
Mhm.
And so now I can meditate anytime and everywhere I am. Even if it's like a super obnoxious area, I can just be in my zone, my
Yeah.
zen zone.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like meditation kind of gets a bad rap for some of the
Mhm.
things you said, because
Definitely.
I literally resisted meditation for many years because I always pictured it that way. I knew that if I sat there and I started thinking of something else, I was failing at meditating.
No.
And I realized that has, for me, nothing to do with it. I feel like some people get to do that and feel comfortable, and that's where they fit with everything else. But the 3 of us here have some attention problems. and so so I feel like for us and other people who have attention concerns, especially anyone in a generation that is 30 years old or less, where they have so much fast pace attention snips, and just to have that and dedicate more than a few seconds at a time can feel overwhelming. So it's more a state of like you said, clearing the mind than anything else. With that thought, what other things, I mean, you suggested, Crystal, Minecraft or other sorts of, some people will do scrapbooking. And I feel like for this sort of a topic we're talking about with these experiences that are, if you want to call spiritual or universal source messages or whatever we want to call them,
Yeah.
different people will reach it in different
Creators
ways.
might turn
Yes.
secret.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I have a friend, Kelly. She's Native American. She prefers to be called Indian, so I'm not trying to offend anybody when I call her my Indian friend. She calls herself a merciless savage because she thinks it's hilarious. But she is very much believes in God, and it's out of her realm of possibility that anybody could not believe in God. So she demanded that I name what I believe in. And I was like, I call it the universe. I mean, for me, it's the universe, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't good enough for her. So creator was good enough for her, which is why I've never used that word before until I met Kelly. And it's like, yeah, that, sure. You know, like I can very much say that I am an atheist. I do not believe in a God, like a being. But on the same token, there's no denying that there's not nothing. I mean, I've just had too many experiences. For some reason, Jules, you made me think of one where, of course, my mom would call this not a miracle, or I don't know what she'd call it. But when I was 12, Liberty was 15, we went to Germany by ourselves because my dad's a freak of nature. And and we were at the train station. We were trying to get, I think, to the airport. I think it was either the beginning of our trip or the end of our trip. And we were having to take the long train, not the subway type train, right, to get to somewhere. And we got down to the platform and we were lost. Not on the right platform, not the right train. And all of a sudden, this man walks up to us. Big, I mean, in my memory, you got to remember I was 12. He probably looked nothing like this, but in my memory, he was a big dude in a tan trench coat, hat, and he was kind of like intimidating, right? But he was like, "What are you girls looking for?" In English, of course. "What are you girls looking for?" And we're like, "We're looking for train 274 or whatever." And he's like, you're on this platform. You got to cross over to this platform." But it was a like huge trek to go back up to the main, whatever it's called, lobby, right? And then go back down the thing. Anyway, had we barely made it. So had he not approached us, we would have missed the train. And it just so happened when we told my mom that story, she was like, "Oh my gosh." At that exact same moment, I stopped everything. I had an inspiration to stop everything and just say a little prayer for you guys. And I did. And like, I know, and that's the thing. And so it's like, coincidence? They're like, come on, man. Like, stop everything and say a little prayer real quick. Come on. That's just,
well, that's very much like our letter.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
We just discussed an experience yesterday. Do you want to explain it? You want me to?
You can explain.
Okay. So the house is on the market. So I've been going through all of my stuff. And I found a letter from Julianna that was a photocopy of a letter. And it said, "My dearest mother," but the writing was different than typical. I actually thought it was from Joshua at first because of the way she printed it. And then I started reading it and it said, "I'm happy to be your daughter." And wait, what? and so I actually glanced down to who it was from, because for a second I thought it wasn't for me, because I thought, well, this is different. What is it? And then I saw it was Julianna. So I was reading it. And it was either Saturday or Sunday last week. I'm not positive, but it was one of those days. And I thought, oh, sweet, and everything else. And I packed it in my stuff and put it away and continued to do my thing. Well, I got here, and yesterday I found a card that Jules had pulled aside for me that she and Craig had both written letters to me.
2018, mind you.
Yes. One of the letters was the one I had just read the photocopy version of on Saturday or Sunday. And Julianna said she discovered it when?
Either Saturday or Sunday too. And I read the whole thing. I'm like, oh, this is so sweet. And I thought it was from my daughter, but I kept reading and it was from me because the writing was just weird. So
and the irony, connectivity, the whatever of it, that we were reading it either on the same day or very close to the same day, the same letter. And Craig had written one too, and they had written it during their impact experience. And I said, I remember reading these then. And they're like, how? And we're like, none of us could remember how, none of us could remember why. I had a photocopy of it because I had sent a book home that had the original copies, we think, with Eliza, right?
No,
We don't know where it came
it
from.
wasn't in her bag.
It just suddenly appeared. We have no idea where it came from, but it's one of those experiences. And a question that comes to mind for me, I mean, because we talk about this freely among each other, but has there ever been a time where either of you have had kind of feedback or feelings that you couldn't express this to other people? This sort of a thought or a feeling?
I mean, yes, but I can't think of anything specific. I
Mhm.
remember, I don't know if this fits the bill, but I used to work for a company where I was the basically the office manager, accounts manager, just kind of the admin person for the office. Anyway,
Ah.
and I did our software cost $2,500, and I did a lot of returns. So people would return the software, and I would. It was in a time when corporate credit cards were a big thing. So I'd get a. How can I think of the word? I can really think of PTO for some reason, but not that. PO. That's what it is. I'd
Oh,
get a PO,
purchase order. Mm-hmm.
purchase order,
Yeah.
right?
Gotcha.
And then they'd pay it with a credit card because for whatever reason corporate cards were big. And so then I would just do a reversal on their credit card, right? I would actually
Mhm.
type into the credit card machine,
Yeah,
negative
back in the day.
$2,500 and swipe it. Yeah. And I did a lot of them, surprisingly. I mean, I did a lot more charges than refunds, but I did a lot of them. And I remember I was poor, right? I was a single mother, newly single mother, had a baby. And I remember thinking to myself, I could just give myself a refund to my debit card and nobody would know. And I'd have $2,500, which at the time would have been like today, $10,000.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I thought about it every day, every day, every day, every day. And it was so tempting. And so finally one day I'm like, I am going to do this and I'm going to get caught and I'm going to go to jail, but I can't get the thought out of my head. So I went and told my dad. I said, Dad, I really want to do this. And I'm telling you because I want you to know if I start acting like, I've got money to burn, I've done it.
Ah,
And that was enough for me to not ever think about it again. Because I
wow.
knew I couldn't conceal it. I knew like I was too young and immature. I would have just
Right.
been an idiot. And so like something you can't share in the sense of like I want to murder somebody. No, I haven't had thoughts like that, but I have definitely had thoughts where I'm like, what kind of a person am I that I'm thinking about this? This is another conversation I had with my dad. I was like, I keep thinking of these things and I don't remember what the specifics were. And I'm like, I'm a good person. Why do I think of these things? And that's when I learned from my wise and old father that I should be probably 40 at the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know how old he is now.
But he was like, it's not about the thoughts. It's human to have the thoughts. It's when you
Right.
carry them out that
So
is the
true.
problem. Just have the thought and let it pass. Because the thoughts are going to come no matter what.
Yeah.
And
Well-
that's what I learned is just sometimes thoughts come and it's like,
Well, I know that there were times in our history that we've had really rough times. This was like, oh, and so, and that's really interesting. I appreciate you mentioning that. And one of the things too, I think that like with these experiences we're talking about, which can feel to me, I kind of qualified it as spiritual. But I know sometimes I can talk to people like my partner doesn't necessarily believe that these things are real. And have you guys ever been where you didn't say something to somebody because you knew they didn't believe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At first with my husband, like he was kind of like, that's weird. Like, why would that happen? And it seems really off. So it's probably just not what is happening. And like, with my nephews and nieces, like they're more LDS, and so they don't seem to go into that stuff. So it's like that's not something that you should share with people.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, well then in that moment, I'm like, all right, I need to actually just pick and choose who I need to talk to. And with my husband, I'm like, I'm going to be with him forever. So I'm just going to get him into that.
Well, and that's what I've done with Max as well, is he's like, so this is one of your airy fairy moments. And I'm like, absolutely. And what was really funny is about 2 weeks ago, something happened and he said, oh, that's one of those things, isn't it? And because I kept talking about it because it was important to me. And actually, I didn't realize how often I do talk about things like that to people generally. Because one time, this just came up for me as one of these sort of mystic supernatural experiences. I was volunteering at a food bank, which is neither here nor there, except for the fact about later where I realized what the building had been. And I was doing my little volunteer shift, and the manager of the volunteer organization came up to me and she said, so there's a ghost upstairs that people are afraid of. Could you come get rid of it? And I'm like, me? Sure, I'll try. And I said, but I have no idea what that really looks like. And I said, but I'll sure go give it a go. Because she said it was such that the people were afraid to go upstairs because they were feeling uncomfortable. They were feeling afraid of this ghost feeling, this being, whoever it was. And they all had felt that it was a male figure. It was not threatening per se, but it was there and it was bothering them. So I thought, okay, sure, I'll give it a go. I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I know I can't make it worse really, but because I invite only light. And so I brought my Tibetan bowls, I brought some bells, and I can't remember what else, maybe some crystals or something. And I went upstairs and I said, hey, I understand someone's up here. Who are you? Can you tell me who you are? Hello. And I didn't get an answer like I'm George Smith and I've been, whatever. But I knew the energy or entity was close to me, just because I could feel it. And I said, listen, I just talked to it like I talked to everybody else. And I said, you know what? People are feeling uncomfortable with you, or you're here. Do you have a message you'd like me to give to someone? I didn't get anything from that. I got really more of a no. I mean, I didn't get a no. I just felt like it was a no. And I said, well, the people here would like you to depart. They're feeling uncomfortable. And if you're open to it, I'd like you to do that. And then I went around and I rang my bell and I did my bowl and I just said, thanks for leaving. Have a good life, whatever. I'm like, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it worked.
Good life. Have a good death. Have a good something.
So whatever's next. And I'm like, okay, ciao. And so I went and I literally went through every room up there. And then the manager had been gone. I waited till the end of the day when most people were gone. And then I went down and I said to someone, okay, I'm finished. And I left and I didn't come back until the following week. And the manager ran up to me and gave me a giant hug. I'm like, hey, and she said, he's gone. And the entity of whatever it was gone. And she said the employees that wouldn't go upstairs went up there and they felt so joyful up there. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool. And she said, did you know you could do that? I said, nope. So I didn't. But I said, cool. But what it brought to me was a few things, one of which is I talked about it way more than I realized. And I used to feel like I had to kind of know my audience. And it's true. There's some people that I won't talk about some of this stuff because it's special to me. Yes. It's important to me. So I wouldn't talk about it to someone I feel like would make fun of me or something like that. But I'm happy to share it with people just to know that they know about me. But it was interesting because I found out, and this might be interesting to you too, Crystal, is that it was a mortuary. It had been a mortuary. Right? Yeah. And does that bring back memories? Anyway, so
speaking of mortuaries, this is why I choose light. With the whole I was a young kid and I was with cousins, Mark Mason and
Lord have mercy.
And all sorts of different people. And then like we did the whole Bloody Mary thing, and she did cry blood, and I got this feeling, and it was just not the best feeling I could feel, and so I did not like that. I stay away from that now, and like. We also did the Ouija board one of those times, and I did not appreciate that either. And so that's why I choose light and love with the whole
For what it's
energy.
worth, you can use a Ouija board with light. Your sister
Yes.
Odyssey loves the Ouija board. Yeah, just for what it's worth.
Yeah. And
So-
you can choose in or out of
Yeah.
things that work for you.
That's
Yeah.
still for
that's
sure,
awesome.
for sure. I just thought I'd
Yeah.
mention it, not to
Yeah, that's
convert you to Ouija board use.
Well, I was traumatized at that moment.
Yeah, I
and
can
it was
imagine.
with the Ouija board. So
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
get that.
Well, given the whole scenario about it too. Yeah, that's awesome. Crystal, did you have any other questions for our guests?
I was wondering if you ever had a time in your life where you shut it down or you denied it or you tried to talk yourself out of it or anything like that.
well, when after I had the experience with Zendaya, my daughter, yes, I did shut it
Oh, you
down,
can
but
put
I
that at the
tried to
beginning.
bring it
Yeah.
back. I did not want to suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
It just I guess emotionally couldn't handle it. And then I wasn't even getting any spirit or like energy or I wasn't getting any downloads. My crown chakra was like closed. And so I had to really bring it back by opening my crown chakra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my third eye is now like ringing all the time. I know it's open and alive.
Well, I know for my sister, she had a lot of things which we called visions or premonitions when she was young. And they were all very dark. They were all of a death. Someone was dying. And I remember one time we were walking to high school and we could see, we were only about a quarter mile from the high school. And from about halfway, we could see the flag that was at the high school was at half mast. And she turned to me and she said, Mr. Berthe died last night. I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, okay. And so we went to school and I was in my biology class and she was an aide for that class that morning. It was our first period class. And the very beginning, you know how the speakers, they used to do the announcements. Well, the principal came over the speaker and said, kids, I have an announcement. And he said, Mr. Berthe had died. He was in a car and it was very foggy. It was in California. There was this area that was really foggy at night. And he had just gone over the edge of the bridge and he had miscalculated where he was. And I remember looking up and seeing my sister walking towards me with this grief-stricken, shocked face. I mean, she walked to me like a zombie and her arms were out. And I remember I just took her in my arms. I was so grateful that we were in the same space because, you know, I don't know where she would have gone or what, I don't know. But anyway, she just walked to me and I held her and she started crying. And she had the same visions with our half sister died in a car accident. She had seen it in her mind's eye, or however one wants to put it. And there were 4 experiences I know of that she had. And we're twins, as you guys know, but our listeners wouldn't. We're twins. And I remember it was just about then that she said no more, couldn't do it. She cut it off because all she ever saw was darkness. And she just couldn't take it. And I know there's been people I've talked to that I've worked with people to assist them to shift that, where they could bring it to light, that only invite light, and show them how. There was one girl I worked with who had some really hard experiences when she was young and had felt like she was trapped to the bed. And in our last podcast interview, you asked about sleep paralysis. And I wonder now, I mean, I didn't know about it when we were talking before, but I wonder now if part of that was that, or as our last guest felt it wasn't that, it was something else altogether. And so anyway, I think there's ways to shift that. And she shut it off. And I have never done it, but I know over the years I've built what I call a gift. I've built it up by practicing it, using it, leaning into it, feeling comfortable with it. How about you, Crystal?
I had a period of time after the crystal ray, probably right around nursing school time, where I just talked myself out of it. And so I talked myself out of it, suppressed it, just was like, you know, I just talked myself out of it. But what's funny about that is even as I was not practicing, air quotes,
Yeah.
I'd still find myself sending sugar rays and stuff like that. And like now that I've kind of come back into it, like it's so interesting to me. I have kind of this, they say that some women have internalized misogyny. I feel like I have internalized gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm having to work through that because the reality is I hate to say I believe it, because I guess I know what I've experienced, and that's the truth. Those are the facts that matter. And it's been interesting starting with Mystic Detectives, finding myself having to kind of open myself back up again and not be like, oh, this is silly or whatever, because I know it's not silly. I built a whole store around it, for Christ's sake.
For sure. Hey,
But
so
it's
would you,
interesting.
yeah, for sure. Would you take just a second and describe what you mean by gotcha? Because I would like to, if other people listen to this, let them know what that means to you. Get that gotcha.
So first of all, I want to explain that Mystic Detectives is 0% about gotcha. We're not looking to trick anybody. We're not looking to make them trip over themselves. We're truly just here to listen and to learn and get to enjoy other people's experiences. But what I mean by gotcha is, I feel like it gets a little tricky for me being a nurse and also being, having a gift. Because when Kenneth says I was stuck to the bed or whatever, I immediately go medical, right? Like sounds like a medical problem. And so gotcha is something like that. I don't feel like I did a gotcha to Kenneth for what
I
it's
don't
worth.
either.
Okay.
I don't
But
either.
it would be something like, "Oh, that is totally explainable by blah 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 blah." I mean, essentially, okay, I'll narrow it down. I am really bad with words sometimes. For me, a gotcha is you're dumb. You're dumb for believing what you just told me.
Yeah.
That's a gotcha. And
Right.
I will never, ever, ever do that. And I know you won't either, Andrea, in our podcast, because that's not what it's not what we're about. It's not what we're here for. We're here to just learn and enjoy other people's stories and share them, of course, with the world.
Sure. And like I say, that there may be people that listen to this later, and I wanted them to having heard you say that, what does that mean to you? Because really, we, as you say, we just want to open the channels, whatever that looks like, and have people feel safe with things that they're doing. So I think that's awesome. Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Not at the top of my head.
Not at the top of your head?
Nothing.
I gotcha. That's great. Well, I know that we really would love to have any listeners write in with anything that they've had that are along the lines of the experiences or any other kinds of experiences they'd like to share. And we thank you for your time, ma'am.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Yes.
Yeah. We'd love to hear from our listeners. To leave a comment, share a story, or ask a question, email us at listeners@mysticdetectives.com. You can also find out about our Patreon and other interesting things going on at our website, mysticdetectives.com. As always, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave reviews to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Stay curious
and keep exploring.